Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Even as you're still getting your meal and finding a place, I hope you'll come up toward this end. I'm going to go ahead and just give a word of welcome and open us with the word of prayer as well. My name is Sue Garrett, if most of you probably know me. I'm the chair of the Cultural Diversity Committee, and we are hosting this event in recognition of Global Diversity Month. So happy that we could have a representative from Kentucky Refugee Ministries Incorporated to be with us, Alex Mignard, who is, as you can see here, the communications and outreach manager at KRM. She's been there for 4 years, has a very interesting work history before that. But Alex, we're glad for the work that you're doing here in Louisville to help our community be a welcoming community for refugees and their families. I'm going to ask that you maybe stop any conversation for just a few minutes as I say a prayer, and then as our speaker begins her presentation, we want to give her as much time as we can. She's also going to introduce a colleague of hers, Zaid, who is with us and visiting in the United States for his first time here. So let's say a word of prayer. Gracious God, thank you for bringing us together in this place and this time. Thank you for the meal that you have generously provided. May we use its nourishment to do your work. We thank you for the work of Kentucky Refugee Ministries here in Louisville and across our state, and ask that you open our minds and hearts as we listen to Alex and Zay tell us about the work that's being done, and discern how we might also be helpful to that organization in its important mission. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Alex, thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Alex Mignard, as Sue said, and I'm joined today by a visitor that we have, one of the fellows for that's with the World Affairs Council. Some of you are probably familiar with that organization here, and Zaid, he's visiting from Jordan. So feel free to stop by and say hi to him after the presentation. But I'd love to start off with a quick video. This was taken for our organization with some clients and some staff and some of our community partners a few years ago. But it's, I think, a really touching video, and it really kind of sums up a lot of the work that we do, but I'll expand on that in the presentation.
Oh my God, sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay, wait a second. Oh my God. Let's get a little bit proud. R-O-W. To feel at home for me, you need to feel wanted. Here, like when I go to school at lunch, they're like, "Believe, come sit by me, come sit by me." And you're like, "Really? You really want to sit by me? Like for real?"
Who wants to come up and do that?
In South Africa, a lot of people didn't want you there.
You don't know what to do, you don't know where you are going, but as long as I will be far away from these shootings or these killings, massacres you experience every day, as long as I'm far away from there, I will be peaceful. That's the only things you have in your mind.
Refugee is someone who is fleeing due to war, persecution, just a well-founded belief that they cannot return home.
It was Thursday, April 19th, 2012.
Hello, Mireille.
We were just looking for our suitcases, and then,
"Oh, Fiona, Erasto, welcome in America." We were so surprised. They say, "Oh, there are some people who know us here."
And give you some things to help you get settled for your first night.
We try to empower them to be able to make a new life here. Kentucky Refugee Ministries, let me help you.
KRM is an organization that assists in resettling refugees.
We take them to their apartment the night that they arrive, help their kids get plugged into schools, and we tell them, I am your caseworker. However, you'll be working with a whole agency, a whole team of people, and we're all here to work together.
Number 8.
Okay.
What's he doing?
Building the house.
Yeah, building a house. Good job.
I always talk about my story. I was there, and I'm here now. The first thing that is shocking for our client is when they tell you you're gonna learn English approximately for 3 months, and then you're gonna start looking for a job.
The way I got connected with KRM was that we were looking to hire some people, and we called, and I'm going to tell you, it worked out great. They see the opportunities everywhere, and they grab to it and they make something happen. I want people like that to work for me, because if they could do that, they can do anything.
Not every agency who resettles refugees in the United States can do what we do. It's not just employment programs or English classes.
I've seen volunteers from teenagers all the way to folks older than myself. Compassion is at the heart of what we do, and compassion is sort of rolling up your sleeves and getting into the work.
My announcement to the congregation was, we have a family and they're coming next Thursday and we don't have anything. And by Wednesday, we had the apartment all set up and ready to go. They have moved in 4 years from having what came in 4 plastic bags to being able to afford a house.
To be a citizen, it's give you a freedom. Everyone is so happy. We dance, we jump. Coming to your home with your key, you open, you get in, it make you feel so relaxed. Seeing that I can live is something very quite different from that life in Burundi.
I came here, 40 years ago now, and I know what these people go through. Their success, it brings success to this country because they employ more people.
You never know what background someone comes from or in what areas they have a genius. Their kids are hungry for education. They're wanting to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, and that is going to have a huge impact for our city and in our country.
We help people to give back to the community that welcome them.
Our ancestors fled really horrible things before there was a refugee program in place, and they were seeking the same things that people are seeking now. It's important for us to remember our roots, to remember where we came from, to remember who we are as a nation.
I can see, believe in the precious. They are comfortable and so happy. They are living the life I never lived. Which one do you want?
It makes me proud because they would give up everything to come here. It inspires me to do more and to kind of like repay them for all the sacrifices that they made for me.
I don't know about y'all, but that video still gets me. I've seen it so many times, and it's still, oof. Kind of the breakdown of what I'll chat about, the refugee journey and resettlement, what that journey looks like, the steps along that path. To get some context, current news here with resettlement in Kentucky and the nation, and what we do as an organization, engaging with folks. That's cultural awareness, trauma-informed care, and then ways that our community helps and how you all can get involved on a lot of different levels and ways. And then at the end, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. So globally, we're currently at an all-time ever for the most recorded folks that are displaced around the world. That's over 117 million, which is a pretty staggering number. And the majority of that piece, that light blue, are IDPs. It's over 60% of that number. And IDP stands for internally displaced person. And that's somebody who they're a refugee really, but they can't technically be considered a refugee because they haven't crossed over an international border to seek protection through the United Nations. And so that's basically millions of people in Ukraine right now who have moved to what they're hoping is a safer part of Ukraine, but they've still had to flee their home. Refugees make up over 30% of that number, and that's folks that have crossed that international border. They're seeking protection and resettlement through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or the UNHCR, and that's been around since 1951. It was a lot of nations getting together after the Holocaust as a response to the millions of displaced people around the world that they said, we need a way to be able to provide aid, humanitarian services, and homes for people on a large scale that get displaced like this. And then about just over 5% of the number are asylum seekers. So for us here in the US, that's largely folks coming from Latin American countries seeking asylum. And I'll break all that down in a second because it gets really convoluted what all that really means. But who is a refugee? This is that kind of standard definition that I put up there, just to kind of underscore that this is a last resort for folks. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their country due to persecution, conflict, violence, human rights violation. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, membership to a particular social group. It's a last resort. People are leaving behind everything here. They're leaving behind sometimes their entire family, everything they've ever known, the country where they speak their language, all their belongings. This is not a lighthearted choice or just like, I feel like moving. Folks are really feel as though there is no other option to keep themselves, their children safe. And so to kind of break down that journey, it's going to zigzag from the top left down to the bottom right. And like I said, someone experiences violence, persecution, that well-founded fear that they're no longer safe. And then that second step is that flight from home, which can be one of the most traumatic, terrifying parts of that journey for a lot of people. And that looks like a lot of different things. And I'm sure you all have heard about the boats capsizing off of Greece, that hundreds of people lose their lives. That's the level of desperation that folks are experiencing. But some people will walk hundreds of miles on foot through landmines, through war-torn country to an uncertain end. You'll get separated from your family. People get human trafficked in that time period. Some people will spend every last penny they have to give to a smuggler to get them out. It's very dangerous. It's one of my friends who came with her family in the 90s from Bosnia. She talked about how her and her brother, her parents used to make them sleep with their shoes on, with a backpack by the bed because they never knew. And one night they did have to just kind of get up and go. So very uncertain time. That third step is once people cross over that international border into another country. A lot of folks try to make their life in that country, but like in the US, they're not allowed, they don't have the visa clearance or the ability to be a resident permanently or legally work there. So some folks, their only option is to be in the camps. And those conditions are not always ideal in any way, shape, or form, or temporary. The majority of refugees, over 65%, I believe at this point, are protracted refugees, which means they have spent 5 or more years in a camp. One of my former colleagues who was originally from Bhutan spent 17 years in a camp in Nepal before getting resettled with his family here in the US. And he was our housing manager for years at KRM. But those conditions also, because you have to think like those camps are in the adjacent countries to where this war and violence is happening. So a lot of times those humanitarian aid organizations can't get in, or the supply chain gets broken, and the food and water shortages are very severe for folks, adding to the stress, adding to the trauma and the violence, and the danger for people there. People have talked about how they've gotten 1 jug of water, 1 gallon jug of water for their entire family allotted for a day. That's for drinking, cooking, bathing, cleaning. That doesn't go very far, especially not for like a family of 6 or 8. But once they are in that secondary country, that's when they can apply for refugee status through the UNHCR. And those offices are located in a lot of different countries around the world. And that process is one of the most heavily vetted, thorough background check application processes someone can go through. They get cross-checked by the CIA, obviously the United Nations, and a lot of different organizations. They look into all your history, all your family ties. And at a good time, if someone's lucky, that process just takes about 2 or 3 years. For some, it's much longer, and for some, they don't. It's very common for folks to not get approved altogether. So we do a lot of that. A lot of the times when we have 1 or 2 people arriving, it's, the father of the family joining his wife and children, or, an elder parent joining their adult children and their family, something like that. But that's really traumatic for folks also. I mean, we have teens that will have to stay back with family that are, trying to graduate high school, and they get, a teenage girl gets separated from her mom. Like I'm just thinking of that from my own experience, how hard that would be to be separated from your family at that time. So that it's really challenging for people and sometimes for years. But if they do get approved for resettlement in a third country, and they're approved for the United States, then they get allocated to one of the 10 national offices that we have that are approved through our U.S. State Department and are part of our refugee resettlement program through the federal government. And ours is CWS, or Church World Service. And then they decide regionally kind of where those people get placed. And usually that's because they have a U.S. tie, we call it, or family members. Some sort of connection to kind of help them settle in, have family there, have a community. But usually it's somebody rejoining family. That's how folks end up at KRM. So breaking down those types of resettlement really quickly, a lot more nuances to these, but kind of in general, a refugee, like I said, that's somebody who's crossed that international border. They're registered with the UNHCR. They are approved. The important distinction, I think there's 2 real important ones. They're approved for resettlement before they ever set foot in this country. It's not asylum seekers. They're not seeking asylum. They're already approved. And it's intended for a permanent resettlement because the reason that they've been given refugee status is because it's been determined that in no foreseeable future is it ever going to be safe for them to return to their home. And then the other really important distinction is they are eligible for full access to all of our services that we offer at KRM, for government benefit services, those temporary benefits like SNAP, Medicaid, things like that, until folks get back on their feet and start earning income from their job. And it's an automatic pathway to residency. So after a year, they're automatically eligible for a green card or legal permanent residency. And then after 5 years, after they pass the citizenship test, naturalization. But they're not subject to deportation. Internally displaced person, I kind of covered that one already. Asylum seeker, most people are fleeing for the same reasons, but because of the different, stipulations with nationalities, with exactly what's going on in their country, it has been deemed that they are not being granted that refugee status. So they have to arrive and then make their claim. So they are subject to deportation, which is the really scary, challenging part for those folks. And they have to prove that they meet that definition, that they need asylum. And what our attorneys try to do, like with our Cuban asylum seekers, of which there are many here right now, are beat the court date. So we try and get their asylum court date before the deportation court date, and we've had a lot of success with a lot of folks at that. Parolee and evacuee, that's one that not typically used, but we've heard it a lot in the last couple of years. It's a formal admission, we call it TPS, or temporary protected status, for folks. That's Ukrainians that have arrived, folks that are coming in under the new, I forget the order of the acronym, the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan humanitarian parole sponsorship program, where people can privately sponsor a family member or somebody they know, and they get 2 years of protection. Some folks came in from Afghanistan through that as well. We've gotten a lot of families asylum that way. And then special immigration visa. So those are folks right now from Iraq or Afghanistan. I think they might have ended the one for folks from Iraq. But people that have worked with our U.S. military or government or a non-government aid organization overseas, and because of that, their lives have been in danger, generally by the Taliban, for being an interpreter or a guide. And so we've granted them refuge here in the U.S. It's kind of refugee status plus it's all the same benefits and eligibility, except they have their green card before they arrive. So they have that with them when they arrive on the plane. So they're already a resident when they come. I'm a visual learner, so I like to put up the map. This is for Kentucky, not the U.S. overall, although that's obviously true for some areas. But for us here, and you can see that it's not just one part of the world. Sadly, global violence and conflicts, it's very widespread. But these are where we, the areas where we have the most clients from. So that really large, big pin in the central part of Africa, that's the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. We float between 1 and 2 for the most Congolese folks resettled in the entire country in Kentucky, which is kind of a fun fact for our state that is much less populated than the really big states resettling folks. And then we have and are now continuing again to receive a lot of people from Afghanistan. A lot of people are getting approved. They're upping that number for this new fiscal year, which we're very excited about. A lot of people got approved for resettlement recently. A lot of folks from Syria have started to arrive again. But our largest population by far, and they're not coming from under refugee status, but asylum seekers or humanitarian sponsored parolees, Cubans. There were over 11,000 that arrived to Kentucky just this last fiscal year, which is a staggering number because total refugees that we resettle, I mean, again, we don't provide the comprehensive services legally, we cannot, for Cubans and Haitians coming in and some of the other groups of folks, but than we can for refugees. So it's a lot more involved with our refugee clients. But we resettled about, I think it was 770 to 800 refugees. So that Cuban number eclipsed that. A lot of people coming in from Haiti. Some folks are starting to arrive again in larger numbers from Ukraine, but that's more our Lexington office. We have a pretty substantial population in Lexington as opposed to Louisville. And so this is how you get an idea of the refugee admissions number. This is the number that is set each fiscal year by our sitting president. That was started in 1980 by Jimmy Carter. And the black line on there is it's gotten a little swirly with the thing. Is the number that was set, and the white line is the number that was actually admitted. So you can see most people stayed pretty close to that line, aside from George W. Bush, which we all know what happened in 2001. That had a pretty significant effect on how many people came in for a few years after. And you can see there was a historic low during the Trump administration, and that continued for years, what happened was that really crippled our infrastructure. And that ended up closing many offices, reducing heavy number of staff at the offices that did stay open. Federal programs got cut, funding went away. We've been rebuilding from that. We still are, and it's a real challenge. Our staff has been under a lot of stress, but we're lucky. We're one of the organizations who got a lot of funding to rebuild and build our capacity back up. So we're slowly raising our numbers. But this past fiscal year, we just got the numbers, just over 100,000 resettled. That's the most in 3 decades. The last time you can see was during the early Clinton administration was the last time that number was hit. And so just a quick year-end report for this fiscal year that ended on September 30th. So we're number 1 per capita among all 50 states, because the other ones, the large, the top states for resettlement, California, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, much more populated states. We're 14th overall, but that doesn't include the over 11,000 Cubans, and Louisville is second behind Miami for the most Cuban arrivals in the country. Yeah. And there's a reason for that, which if anybody wants to know more, happy to chat about that more at the end. And then you can see the top US refugee arrivals by nationality. That number 1 nationality are Congolese folks, and that's why we're so busy here, because we are currently number 1 with Congolese resettlement for all US states. But a lot of folks arriving, we only anticipate that number to continue to rise. So who we are a refugee resettlement agency and an outreach community. It takes a village, really, a big one, to do the work that we do. We provide comprehensive resettlement services, and we advocate for incoming refugees in order to encourage hope and an increased sense of belonging. That's the real goal, to make people feel as though this is their home and they have a community. They have people that are welcoming and supporting them here, and they can be successful in that. But we've been open since 1990, 34 years, originally by a member of Highland Presbyterian Church. Right next door, we rent from them also. So. And over 30,000 refugees and asylum seekers served in that time here in Louisville, from over 50 different nationalities and ethnic groups, and who speak over 100 different languages, which is really fun to hear around the office. And we have offices now in Lexington and Northern Kentucky as well. And so what we do, I've mentioned some of this, but the core services, those are those basic amenities that we all need to live and function. Furnished housing, we arrange housing for folks before they ever arrive, so they can come in from the airport and set their bags down. It's already furnished. That's a big volunteer or co-sponsorship opportunity, is to kind of set houses up for folks. Documents and IDs, all those, social security numbers. We have a case management team. People get assigned a caseworker that help them navigate all of this, make appointments, get to the doctor, temporary, like I said, assistance programs, health screenings, mental health as well. We just increased our mental health team because, as you can imagine, folks have endured a pretty significant amount of trauma in most cases. And we also do victim advocacy for things like, any violent crime or domestic abuse situations. And then that second tier of services, that's really making, hoping to get folks to start feeling a little more part of the community. And self-sufficient, and most people are ready. They're ready to be on their own and rid of us. But orientation to transit, how to ride the bus around town, which can be a real challenge to navigate. English as second language or ESL classes for a broad spectrum. It is a very broad spectrum of language of folks that come in. We have a team of job developers that partner with different employers, everyone from Amazon to like private law firms. And try to place people where they have a best fit. Family center for the new moms and the babies, and provide childcare free of charge so that they can have equal opportunity to ESL classes and therapy and job readiness courses. Cultural orientation, that's another broad spectrum. A lot of folks are very familiar with our Western culture here in the US. A lot of people lived in very rural areas or tribal areas. They might not have used a light switch. They might not have turned on their stove. A lot of that is just about keeping folks safe in their own home. But we have special guest speakers that talk about a broad range of services just to help people integrate here. We have an elder program. It's a lot more difficult to adjust if you are moving after 70, 80 years somewhere. Health concerns, language concerns. So we have a specific coordinator for those folks. We just had a 96-year-old that came in. And so there's like, I mean, it goes on up. So, you know, folks just need a little extra care at that age. We have a full team of attorneys. We have 6 legal immigration attorneys and Department of Justice accredited representatives to help people with family reunification or asylum cases, citizenship prep classes, and then arts programming, which Christella Philippe, who is in the room tonight, is on there. Yeah. She just did an incredible performance last Friday of her original song, Bells of Liberty, which is also on YouTube. Just going to do a shameless plug for you. Phenomenal talent. If you all haven't listened to the recording on that, please, please, it's on our YouTube page.
You're selling giveaways.
We're good. Oh. So I've talked about some of this already. So the barriers and challenges, which I mention not to say that, you know, this is, you know, something people can't overcome. It's to highlight what people do overcome, that this journey and what folks go through and come out the other end of is a true testament to the fortitude, the resilience, the strength of the human spirit. It's incredible. But some of those main kind of overarching barriers to just recovery from this, to resettlement, to you know, making a life, is trauma. That's a huge one. It's usually very complex, not one incident. Usually a long period of time that folks have endured this, and it takes a long time to heal from that, if ever, fully. So people are really working through that, and that's something to really be aware of if you're engaging with folks, doing volunteer work, or just hanging out with your friends, peers, neighbors who might have gone through this. Language, like I said, a broad spectrum, everything from folks who are pre-literate to they speak 7 languages. She's now a case manager, but she was formerly our receptionist, and Gentil, she's Congolese, casually learned her 7th language, Spanish, to help more with the Cubans when she was in reception. So it's all over the place. It's everything in between. But that can be a big barrier, especially when you talk about like everything else, transportation. Think about trying to ride the bus when you've only spoken and read Arabic your entire life and you're in an unfamiliar place. You've also had a lot of trauma. You don't feel safe, especially as a woman, and you're trying to navigate getting around. You're afraid to ask for help. You don't know how to read the signs. It's the little things we don't think about that complicate everything. And when somebody says like, oh, well, you know, folks don't want to be a part of the community, that's because maybe they feel so isolated and don't feel comfortable getting out. It's not that they don't want to be a part of the community. It's that there are all these other things that compound that make it not as easy as we think. Cultural barriers, like I said, that's another really broad spectrum that folks kind of need. Some people need a lot, some people don't. Ukrainian folks that are coming in have an easier time. Cubans, Haitians have an easier time than maybe somebody coming from really rural parts of Africa or Asia. Overcoming setbacks. You know, the stories that you hear from folks, another one from a former colleague from Syria who has 2 PhDs and said, you know, I came from an affluent family, had a great job, had a nice car, I had a nice house, around all my family. 1 week, gone, everything, gone. She hasn't seen her family in, I think, 8 years now, and is really trying to rebuild from that. So that as well, you know, we have a lot of folks that were doctors, lawyers. Our former head of medical casework, Dr. Gulali Khan, a very prestigious 30-year surgical career, own clinic in Pakistan, and she wasn't certified to practice medicine here. And so that's a real challenge, to either start over in that field here, get recertified, go back to school, spend all that money going back to school, and or start over, maybe in the Amazon warehouse, or whatever job that we can place folks in. So that's a real challenge. Interrupted education, that's a real struggle for kids, especially going through high school years, and you're not able to graduate until 2021, and you're quite a bit behind the rest of your peers that age. So, but yeah, some of the main ones, the list is long, sadly, but like I said, it's a real testament, because folks really overcome this. And engaging with refugees and immigrants, like I said, there's a lot of unique strengths that people have, but also needs that are related specifically to their cultural backgrounds and experiences of forced displacement. And inevitably, we're going to be in cross-cultural situations. And in order for us to deliver the services that people need, that are meeting those needs culturally, socially, and linguistically, we need to ensure that we're doing so with cultural awareness, that the people we work with are doing that as well. It just helps with ensuring communication, feelings of safety, respectful engagement, and just compassion overall for people. And what I mean by that cultural awareness, I'm sure you all are familiar here with what that means, but it's obviously not knowing everything about everyone's culture. That's very hard unless maybe you have a very extensive anthropological fieldwork career, but otherwise it's a challenge. It's more about respecting differences, and not assigning value, not better or worse, good or bad, right or wrong, and being aware that, this could just be a cultural difference, not an offense or someone disrespecting, because those are the big things that we can see more easily, but it's also the small things, punctuality, modesty of dress, different expectation around social situations, even just like physical touch or greeting. Punctuality is a big one. We have a lot of folks that, we're obsessed with timeliness in this country. A lot of people are not in many, many countries. It's kind of like, I got there when I could. I was visiting with an elder. I was, watching my nieces and nephews, or I needed to run some errands. I'm here now. And here it's, you say that to the doctor and they're like, well, you're going to have to come back in 2 months when we can get you back in. And that's really challenging, especially when someone needs medical care that they have been without for a long time. So just something to think about and consider when engaging with folks, and just maintaining an openness to learn. Build that knowledge of other cultures and keep that throughout your life. Avoiding generalizations, much like in the US, a lot of folks in the same country were the oppressors of those people in their country as well. So it's important to not generalize folks. Cultures, as we know, are very dynamic, diverse, complex. Get to know folks, be friendly, be neighborly, but honor boundaries. It's really important. Like I said, trauma triggers, though that's a really common thing. It's something to really be aware of, and honoring boundaries will really help with that. And to acknowledge that there's varying levels of language ability, just to make sure you're understood. I do this in English, my first language, all the time. I'll just nod and be like, yeah, I have no idea what they said. So when we're talking to each other in different languages, it's important to make sure everyone's being heard and understood. And then just self-awareness, reflect on your own cultural values. If you find yourself getting frustrated or maybe not understanding, check in with yourself on that is really important. Gone over a lot of this, but just to say, trauma-informed engagement, there are a lot of very long-lasting side effects for folks. Again, those very visible things that we can see, but a lot of the other things, even like a loss of cultural identity, just being easily overwhelmed, difficulty adjusting, kind of panicking easy, physical pain even. So just to acknowledge that people are going through a lot more than you know, or than you may think. And just to, again, hold that in your mind, and try to not, avoid potential triggers for folks. There's a lot of resources out here, and you all can hang on to the, these slides after. But there's, if you ever want to broaden that information, Switchboard is another one that I don't have on here, but it's great. Cultural Atlas, I really love. It's an Australian website, but it's still very relevant for resettlement here. But they do like a quick do's and don'ts breakdown of different countries. It's great even if you're just traveling somewhere. But some of the other ones are a little more like lengthy narrative. But CORE offers some great like webinars, trainings. CDC has some good, refugee health, if anybody's in healthcare or if anybody's an educator or in the school system. USA Hello has some really great information for working with refugee kiddos. And getting involved. We love help and we love donations, and we couldn't do the extent of the work that we do without that. And there are a lot of ways we make it very easy for anybody on any level that you're able to help us. Volunteering, we have tons of different opportunities. I'm out of my handout, or I would have brought it, but that's everything from, working in the family center with the little kiddos, helping in ESL classes, helping out at events, citizenship class, just doing admin work around the office, home visits for folks. Like a lot of people like to go hang out with the elderly people. They'll make an appointment with them in their home, just so they're not as isolated if they're not, working for the older folks. Co-sponsors, we, as Sue mentioned with Harvey Brown, your church just did they do co-sponsorships. That's where there's kind of a more formal commitment, and a group comes together and helps in the first 90 days of a family arriving. We'll meet them at the airport, help maybe with the home setup, help get them to maybe a couple of appointments. And it's a really great, very rewarding for everyone program, and I'm happy to talk to anybody more about that if you're interested in getting involved. It doesn't have to be a church. We have just neighborhood groups or friend groups that get involved as well. Donations, that's, financial donation drives. We're doing a coat drive right now, newer gently used coats. But house setups, we need, furniture donations for that as well. So even if you're just, getting rid of some plates or a sofa or a chair, we'll take it. And we have a moving team that will pick it up. Or you can drop it, but all kinds of things. Happy to give folks more information on that. Or you can just join us for an event or activity. We have really fun KRM Live performances, World Refugee Day Global Gourmet that just happened on Friday is our big fundraiser, or become a community partner. We work with a lot of folks. If you're an employer or you have property, we always need those partnerships for housing and jobs. And then I like to end it with just random acts of kindness. These are easy, these are free. Just let folks know they're not alone. Volunteer to teach some English, or just learn to say hi in other languages are welcome. Share stories, spread awareness, speak out for refugee and immigrant rights. People, when they arrive here, they don't have the voice they don't have the platform for advocating for these really important policies that are happening. And it's really important that the people that we do, that have a voice, that can do that can vote, that we do that. Support a refugee or immigrant-owned business. You all, if you're not taking advantage of the amazing international food and restaurants around here, you're missing out. There's really, really good food. But yeah, encourage folks to teach about refugee and immigrant issues. You can register your Kroger card rewards as well, that Kroger donates every time you scan your card. You can do that on their website. They give money to KRM. And just be neighborly, help folks feel at home. That's it. Yeah, we have a newsletter. You can find a lot of the stuff online. You can follow us on social too. But thank you all. Yeah. Yeah.
You would just fill the questions, and if you could repeat the question.
Mhm.
that our external viewers can hear, that would be
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody have a question? Or anybody online as well?
I'd be interested for you to say more about the Cuba connection.
Yep, Cuba. Why we have so many Cubans? Yes, it's very random. I've asked this question a lot in the community. They're like, why? There's always a reason for these kind of things. So back in 1994, a lot of the southern border cities were getting very overwhelmed, and those agencies said we just don't have the capacity to serve these people, and the number that are coming, and so. Our relationship with Cuba since the 60s has been very fluid and ever changing with the policies. We know the wet foot, dry foot thing, and the Marion boat lift and things like that. So it's always been changing, but there's always kind of been a special relationship then, with other Latin American countries and with Mexico, a lot of places. So there's kind of been a special allowance for Cuban folks. So they've had an easier pathway to get here and to get residency and then citizenship. But in 1994, we were one of the few agencies in the country that said, yes, okay, we can, when our national office reached out, they said, which at the time was the Episcopal Ministries, Episcopal Migration Ministries, was our national office. And the other two were in New Jersey and I think like Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania somewhere. And we're the only ones that agreed to do this. And Pittsburgh and New Jersey are colder, more expensive, further from Cuba and Miami. And so, Kentucky, Louisville was a lot more appealing for folks. And so it has built up over time. And then when President Biden got elected, and the policies changed, more people were able to come in, that number has slowly started to rise again for both Cubans and Haitians coming in to the country. The last, I guess it's been about 2 years now, or a year and a half, that we've had a substantial rise in Haitian folks arriving, and Haitian Creole is actually the #1 rising language right now in Louisville.
There might be a question coming through online, but
Yeah, go for it.
do you guys manage Americana apartments? Is that you?
Do we manage Americana?
I mean,
Like, the community center?
in Americana? Yes, no? Is that you guys?
Are you talking about the community center?
Yeah, well, there's apartments as well, and I know Americana apartments on Southside Drive, they have a lot of refugees there. I just wondered if that was one of your facilities.
You know what? That's a good question. We have a lot of folks along Southside Drive, I know, and in that area. I'm unsure if that specific is us. There's a very high likelihood that we do. And I don't. But yeah, there's a lot of folks. We have a lot of Congolese and Cuban folks are around the Iroquois area. A lot of people in Newburgh and West Bushel as well.
Question from Sean online. What kind of educational supports or advocacy could refugees use within the school system?
What kind of support or advocacy could refugees use within the school system? This is a huge one. We have a lot of frustrated teachers and administrative staff from the school system say, oh, we're getting overwhelmed. We don't have the language services. We don't have the support that we need for the kids that are coming through in these numbers. Actually, our youth caseworker just left to work for JCPS as their refugee student coordinator to be able to help facilitate this, because it is such a growing need. And while I will miss her forever, I still get to see her, where I think she can make a much greater impact for the kiddos through JCPS with this role, because it's a desperate need, and they're building up her team right now. So, getting that extra support, they're developing language services, they're developing communication to the parents. What a lot of people don't realize when they say, oh, have the parents scan this QR code, or have the parents, download this. They're not going to do that. They don't know how to do that. They're not. It's not going to work. It's not the proper format for the families that we're serving, and the amount of interpretive services that are needed in languages that are, unusual for a lot of folks. We're luckily building that up a lot in Louisville, but that takes time to build up enough, Kinyarwanda speakers in Kentucky, and things like that. So language support is massive. Affordable interpretation, accurate interpretation that is not Google Translate, which is not good. If you have to use it in a pinch, fine, but it's not ideal. So basically an acknowledgement and awareness of how best to communicate with families, and broadening language services are a really big one. And then if 5 more newcomer academies could open would be great, because they're awesome, but they're most often at capacity. But they're a great resource through JCPS, that kind of school, to help kids in that first year or two to adjust and settle in, that need a little more support before just having to go into the regular school system without that.
I think that perhaps we should call initiatives, but thank you so much for coming. I know that you've been excited as I have been to learn more about the work that they are doing. So let us give Alex and Zayden.
Thank you.